you've got people like the BNP, but how representative are they of mainstream thinking in this country? Because actually, is it not the case that, on the whole, people in this country get on pretty well with it?
Yeah, they do. When it suits them.
As long as the economy is good, differences will start to show when the economy weakens.
I mean, it's already weakened, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And have you actually seen evidence of that?
I don't think this is switched off.
We just had the EDL in Leicester a couple of months ago. That would be...
Was that due to the economy, though? I just think that's radical.
Oh, the English Defence League.
Yeah.
Can a black or brown person be truly British?
You can be in India, living in India, never been here, and still be British.
So there's the simple connection of having a British nationality or a British passport.
I can't understand what you actually mean by what is British these days.
Yeah, why does British automatically mean being in England?
Does colour come into it? Can black or brown be British? Can white be American? Can white be Australian? Can white be British? A lot of white people who came from Germany, a lot of white people came from Ireland. In fact, more black people go to churches.
There's still a kind of basic English culture, because outside of the big cities, the vast bulk of Britain is still, you won't see many black or brown faces. The population is still concentrated in certain areas. The bulk of England is still primarily white. There is still basically an English culture out there that we're not really part of, and we can never be part of. But over time, the immigrant population, they pick up and adopt a lot of the cultural habits, if you like, of what's regarded as English culture, celebrating the Christmas and
I'm moving out.
there is that adoption of all of those kind of basic practices, isn't there? But you'll always have that distinction, because you only need, every now and again there'll be an event like the Golden Temple thing in 1984, when it's a wake-up call. Say for example, for the Sikh community, it's a wake-up call that they're losing their identity. They need to, really get back to the basics of their culture again.
Whether you call it British or Great Britain, or you call it England, England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, whatever, it's a country of mixed communities.
These communities aren't really mixed, are they, really, if you think about it? I mean, they're still concentrated, generally, in certain areas.
People are concentrated in their
so it's not really countries. It's not really.
That doesn't mean we're one big world.
No, Leicester's like that.
It'll always be like that.
Leicester, the east side and the south side, tends to be where most of the black and Asian people live, generally. On the west side, it's still predominantly white. This thing about Leicester being a multicultural community, I don't really buy that.
As people progress, and you say people move out and they move into more affluent areas, more village type areas, more grander places, you go into those areas, you still see a kind of mixed but segregated communities again.
Are they really accepted into those communities? I'm not so sure.
Not really, no.
Exactly. I never felt British. I never felt British when I was growing up. We were living in Highfields in a black and Asian community. Being British didn't mean anything really to us. We didn't support England. In fact, we were very anti-England right the way through. Very, very few. I mean, I can't remember a single kid who supported England when England played on the telly. We always cheered. We always cheered the opposition all the way through.
Or Chelsea.
We're Indians in an English country.
But we could relate to the other minority communities like the Irish. They were all, they lived around in the same areas, doing the same kind of jobs as the black and Asian.
We all lived in the same areas.
You had a common kind of interest and a common purpose there. You could relate to them. They didn't feel English or British as such. They saw themselves as disadvantaged.
I feel quite British in the way that I can have all the opportunities that anyone else can have in this country. But these guys will have a different point of view, because when they grew up there was probably quite a bit of racism.
Well,
I feel like Leicester, it is multicultural. I mean, if you go into a city centre, there's all sorts of colours there.
So where is this culture that you're trying to fit into? Because on the one hand, you talk about
except on a Friday, might come out and go back down.
That's why it's still
There's still that big
still that
segregation.
division, I think. And because of the kind of job I do as well, I go to these mining villages in Nottinghamshire and places where there are no.
But wasn't it
black
always the
people.
case?
So you feel very different again. You feel very different again. And it's comforting to drive back down the motorway heading towards.
I'm trying to understand one other thing is that wasn't there always that problem? Before the various communities arrived over the years, that you had the people who lived in the estates, the big houses, the manor houses, and lived in the nice halls and whatever. They had their servants. Whatever. I'm not on about colour there. And then in the city, you had the people who had to live in the city, and you see some of the old films you hear about, based on the Dickens books, whatever. That the ones in the city were the kind of lower end. As it came out, you got better and better. The only thing that's changed is more colours come into it. Right? So don't you feel that, to be honest, the problem has always been there? It's just been dressed up, really, to become more acceptable, as Kieran's saying. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really interfere with your life and your thinking. And the more it continues like that, it'll become less. Like his kids will then think less of it being an issue. The thing is, what Ranjit's, I think, saying is that now you will get the people, picking the right words, but if you're coloured, you're black, brown, whatever, and you're living in a council estate, you will think different to the coloured, black, brown, whatever, who live out a bit, live in the village a bit. Now, you're not discriminating them because of their colour, but because of what they are, where they are. I'm trying to say is that it's not about being British as such.
It's a social.
It's
a social environment, isn't it? Class thing is what once again comes into it.
And I think that's what, to be honest, has been the real problem right from the beginning.
Class that's a bit different. You can have all whites. There will always be a class thing where you've got
That's what I'm saying.
the bottom end.
I'm saying if it wasn't for that,
No, we do it amongst
it's
ourselves.
easier to say
We
that
do
the
it.
colour's the problem.
We've got the new Punjabi guys who come in from India. The ones who are settled here tend to be quite prejudiced against them.
The issue is they feel part of it because they're integrated over time. You're talking about second, third generation people who are discriminated against people who are coming in now, and that's again
So that's not about colour then, is it? That's about really the level of, I'm not sure whether it's class or the level of your social.
No, but the people who've been here, second, third, fourth generation, they believe they're generally integrated here. They're part of this society. Whereas I think they're kidding themselves a little bit there.
Going back to what Kieran's point is pretty strong, does it make any difference now on what colour you are if you're going for this particular job or that particular deal?
I think it was Sonny said that the economic downturn would cause an increase in racial tension.
I look at it the opposite. I think it makes people a bit more acceptable that it's difficult. Less emphasis on colour being the issue about the financial issues.
No, there's less emphasis on the colour when you're going for jobs, but it's still there.
The English, that's definitely there. But what I'm saying, it's not down to the financial markets. I think that will actually improve it. That people become more acceptable of financial issues, and not being colour that's making financial issues.
But the opportunities thing feels kind of a strange con to me at the moment, because the Toffs are back, aren't they? I was reading somewhere that in '97, when Labour won, I think 13% of MPs had private education. Now it's a third.
Yeah.
So we seem to be, at the same time as people think we've got more opportunity, actually we've got less.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, isn't it?
Well, don't you think that's down to actually how many people who progress to move forward in their lives and their position or whatever want to actually be politically minded, be responsible and do something in that area? Isn't it down to that? Don't you find that those kind of people aren't really the kind of mixed people that we will become? You don't
So
want
it's
the
just that
responsibility.
politicians have got strangely to become a politician.
I think the politicians tend to be. If you look at the wide range of them, they're not in the real world.
not just a politician. You know, in terms of how many judges or top lawyers there are in the country, still be very, very small number that are Asian or black in proportion to the population. There's still that glass ceiling.
Yeah, but then you also forget how still a minority of the actual overall population that still is minority. If it's 10%, of which we assume half is still grown over the last 10, 15 years, less than 5%. Is there overall representation of less than 5% in all the top stuff and everything?
No, it's still way less than that.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think maybe in public sector, but in overall general business, everything's all changed now, hasn't it?
But then they don't achieve in the job market.
Because of
Proportionate to their level of qualification.
I think our pressure tends to be more emphasis on going out and getting the job and getting money coming in, as opposed to getting the best job.
I think it's a bit different. I think in business people are feeling that's if you can make money and do it well, then in the end people can't hold your skin colour.
Yeah.
I think that's one route. I think what's happened in the professions though is people are getting their qualifications, top qualifications at university, but they don't seem to have the connections and the networks to make it in the job market, in the professions, at the level that they should make it at.
It's still old school.
So what happens is in law and
right.
in medicine and in accountancy, they get to a certain level in the firm and then they discover they can't go any further, so they have to go and set up their own business. That's what's happening. You know?
It's like with your daughter with the commercial law thing.
Yeah.
Trying to get into that area of law. Virtually impossibility if you haven't got the connections. You know. No matter what your grades, you know. It's still the old network. The old network is still operating as well as it ever has, I tell you.
Hi, this is my sister Alexis.
Hi.
Hi, Alexis.
I'm Nash.
Hi. I'm never going to remember all I know, I'm sure you did.
At the end of the day, everyone wants to feel a sense of belonging with a group. In some form of group. You know. And
So maybe you would want to be British. Maybe you want to keep some of your cultural identity separate. You don't want to lose it and forget it.
Not at all. Which is why I go back to India. I love going back there. I still feel a spiritual connection there, even though I wasn't born there. I still feel that's part of part of my ancestry.
I don't feel any.
But what about Kira?
I don't feel any connection to India when I go.
Do you feel an affinity with Leicester?
Maybe not. I think every now and again, like the 1984 thing that happened with the Sikhs, I think every now and again a big event comes along whereby you reassert your identity and values again. Two energies going alongside, parallel to each other. One adopting Britishness and British culture, and another one simultaneously trying to preserve your own identity or whatever you see yourself as. And there's that constant kind of tension going on.
But it's stronger than that. It's not just trying to return kids. I mean, there's a couple of people, I'm thinking of some of your friends and their kids, where their kids are actually more traditional than their parents. And they're not Muslims either, which is quite strange. So I'm thinking of, somebody like Butchie, who's trying to be liberal with his kids, and his kids seem to be becoming more and more Sikh every day.
I had a friend who was Jewish and his wife was Jewish, and they used to, happily a McDonald's, hamburger, etc. But when they had kids, they decided to become completely kosher and would occasionally sneak out for a hamburger and wouldn't tell their kids that they didn't want their children to be brought up non-kosher and then suddenly decide that they were Jewish and that they wanted to embrace their Jewish identity.
We've got a residual kind of connection, well, maybe more than a residual connection with the Sikh thing. For example, if we go back to India, we'll always go to the Golden Temple, won't we? We don't have to. We actually want to go there. We feel something about going there, don't we?
But what's the
Now
Why is that?
go to the Radisson as well.
But what is the
And then go to the Radisson for a few drinks. Huh?
what's the value of these labels? Because it takes somebody like Salim.
Yeah.
Salim, East Cork, drinks alcohol.
A friend of mine.
Yeah.
You know, ran a Ladbrokes
Betting.
betting shop.
Yeah.
But if you ask him what he is, he'll go, I'm Muslim.
And he celebrates Eid.
As far as he's concerned.
He celebrates Eid.
That's what I mean about identity. But you know that they say now that this idea of pick and mix religions, that actually we live in a society now where we just mix together ideas that capture our imagination. And so we create these kind of newly authentic identities around a kind of, well, I like that aspect of this, like as you say, you know, not really liking the idea of having to give up bacon butties, but quite liking the idea of identifying with sort of some wider aspects of Islamic lifestyle. And we kind of live in the luxury of an environment in which we can create these own tailor-made identities for ourselves.
But can we push it into it? I mean, if I decide, okay, I really quite fancy becoming a member of the Black Evangelical Church. I mean, I could do it, but you know, it wouldn't be easy for me.
Well, perhaps it's most difficult to. But actually, what you're saying there is that you can pick anything you like.
Well,
but people don't exactly.
It's
so actually, it's not about what you choose; it's what other people bar you from doing. So the fact that taboos are still around, it's about those gangs you can't join, isn't it? It's like, for example, I can't become a Mason because I'm female, and so long as the whole idea of Mason, you know, so long as the Masonic ideal is that you have to be male, that is a club I can't join. So in other words, there are still clubs in this country that you can't join. But there are plenty of clubs that you can join, and you can just, you know, sort of pick little off-the-shelf pieces that you like, if you see what I mean.
It comes back to moving out to a village down the road, 5 miles down the road. You know, you never, well, you may eventually, but it probably take years to be accepted in the local country pub, in the village pub, for example. You're not part of that community, are you? You've got no history there, you've got no real connection. I had a friend who moved from Oakley to a very, very nice village near, just outside Corby, and it took him about 5 years just to be accepted in the village pub, really, as part of that. You know what I mean?
I did a survey of our village because I was campaigning for something, I can't remember what, and actually 10% of the people in our village had lived there for fewer than 2 years. Which, when you think about it, actually shows how much turnover there was. And yet you're absolutely right. In my village, you know, we're infiltrators because we've only lived in our house for 10 years.
When I moved to Islington in London about 20 years ago, I discovered that there's 2 kinds of community in London. There's the vast migrant population of whatever colour, including from other parts of the country, who dominate the city largely. So if you go into my local pub, 85% of the people in there are not from Islington, are from London, but they would see themselves as locals. They lived there for a while, and they would come together in this pub and drink. It took me about 5 years to discover that there's an inner core, which is a real local, with people who speak and dress. To become part of that it's taken nigh on 20 years.
And the skin colour, going back to the skin colour, that's just another level that you have to overcome, isn't it? If you know, as well.
Well, when people say how things improved, I think it can be quite deceptive. You know, I listen to all this stuff and people say, well, chicken tikka masala is now the national British dish. There's more of that sold than any of the single dishes. And if you listen to music, people will say, well, it's all fusion music and hip-hop, and in any case, these are all global influences on music. If you watch the newsreaders, there's always total ethnic presence on newsreaders. So that's superficial level. You can get the idea that things have moved on a lot. But to me, it means to have got more stratified. So, for example, in the 60s when I was growing up, it didn't really matter whether you were Irish or Caribbean or Indian. You know, you were mainly working class kids coming from the same area with your parents working in the same factory. So it was a very black-white thing. Very easy. there's this group of
In other words, people combine
yeah,
through
because
class.
they were all in the same
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
boat. I think that sort of stuff has broken down now. And so you can look at something, but it's interesting that some communities appear to be progressing more rapidly than others. And I just have this fear that it's mostly to do with stereotypes. So, for example, if you take the Indian community educationally, in economic life, people say, well, the Indians are doing really well, aren't they? They are, but are Indian Muslims doing well, actually?
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
I think there is still more racism amongst young people towards Asians than there is towards Afro-Caribbeans. And my theory is that is because the Asian community are much better integrated into the upper and middle classes in Britain and into the establishment.
But isn't it the Caribbean kids that we grew up with usually had very strict disciplinarian parents who spoke English, were proud of being part of the British Empire, turned up here. Their kids should have succeeded. They were actually much more integrated on turning up here in the 60s than most Asian families would have been, whose parents
It
acted
was more.
probably. It's kind of strange what happened to them along the way. That they didn't make it, at all. I think it's something to do with the sense that Indians have a history of their own, but the Caribbeans don't have a history, in a sense. They don't have a history because actually they were converted to Christianity, and therefore there's something in the residual consciousness that these people were slaves. That's my theory on it.
I think it's more down to the kind of family, extended family that the Asians have had, and the Afro-Caribbeans. Well, those guys I saw from the ones I used to be close with quite a few, and they kind of became alone. They didn't grow as our families grew. We grew with our cousins. Look, we're here now,
Oh, yeah.
we're cousins, and our kids are their cousins.
Yes,
They say their cousins. I
That's
saw
so
my guys, who were my Afro-Caribbean friends, become less family interested, which meant their bonding, their closeness with the extended family stopped. Which meant I also saw was smaller sizing families for them, where our extended families grew.
Yeah, sport networks weren't really.
And that also then, you had more support network in what you were doing, you were mixing, you were going out. And
you were cushioned against.
And in fact, if anybody gets a leg up, then if you have an extended family, then that is somebody who can then give you a leg up, isn't it?
But
In
also,
other words, you know people who know
You're
people.
cushioned.
yeah, but
against
also don't get you get 3 more smacks because your uncles and aunties telling you what. The thing I've really found is over the years, my nieces now, nephews, who are the 20 to say 30, 33, 34, 35 age group, have gone backwards.
In what way?
They do know that very few of them over that period mixed with other communities. They tend to be more groups of their own. And I was shocked as I've seen them grow up that we were really mixed, except for white men. Everything. I had the whole lot. We went through college, my classmates, whatever. It didn't matter. We used to have a mixture of mates coming and going. We got on with them. Now they've actually all gone back the other way, and they all tend to be with their own.
like Sikh.
Very rarely will I ever see
Muslim group.
You're also finding in certain pockets around the city that there is still some mixture. That becomes then back to where you're living and what kind of areas those.
But I'm
But
just
otherwise,
curious
it's gone
though, do you
completely
think
backwards.
that Leicester is more racist because now schools are dominated by Asians or less racist than the rest of the UK? Is there any kind of sort of backlash of people starting to, white working class people starting to get panicky because they feel intimidated?
I think
I do think they feel a bit downtrodden.
Yeah, but
the ones living in the big council
But the
estates.
geography of the city is very weird because you can wander around the city centre and most of the inner city going outwards, and you think it's a very mixed city, and it works well.
Yeah.
But that's because historically what happened here is that white working class people from the inner city were dumped on estates on the edge of the city, so you never see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they haven't got these. They haven't got the money to come in. You know.
They never
Well, that's
come
what
to
I
the
mean.
city
So-
centre. They
so
never
there
travel
are-
to the city. So if you take dual heritage kids, in theory they should have the best of all possible worlds. But they do seem to do really badly in the education system and in the job market.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you take particularly dual heritage Caribbean and white kids, they really are the bottom of the heap, aren't they? Educationally and in the job market.
There's a far greater number of dual heritage
Those
children
never.
in the care system, which is what I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
It's proportionately far greater than the actual numbers of. They tend to be with a single white mother, where the father has not been part.
The point I made was about the British Empire thing, was what I see as what was British, yeah? But over the years, I don't relate that to what's around me as British.
Which British culture? Which British culture are we talking about? Because if you talk about British working class culture, which is what was originally the only thing we knew, because that's what we brought up for 20 years. We thought that was British culture, and then you get told actually that's not really British culture. That's just the Great and Wash, and so you shouldn't bother with that kind of stuff because we look down on them. So then you start trying to dissect English middle class culture, and you know. After 30 years, I still fail to dissect it.
We realised when we got to about 15, 16, 17 years old, we needed to adopt some different habits if we wanted to stand any chance out there. I mean, that's reality, wasn't it? In fact, that was reality at grammar school at the age of 11. Suddenly you realise, you know, we're thinking and functioning in a very different way here to all the other kids, and you know, if we want to get on it and survive, we have to become a little bit like these people, and you know, to be accepted.
I keep going back to what is actually British, and I'm not sure people can ever really describe to what, because different people have different opinions on what they're, and a majority of the people in this country who have not been in the city, who have not met people like us, not been out, not mixed with people and everything, use it in a way to describe a class system.
If we reduced it to the past form, which is one suggestion, would the world end tomorrow? I don't think so. I mean, take a place like India. The range of cultural practices in India are far wider than you've ever seen in this country. Does it matter? No. Does the state disintegrate? No.
The other threat to our internal stability, our sense of buying into the concept of British, is the threat that those communities that are erroneously identified with the terrorism feel that they can no longer feel comfortable that their rights will be respected.
What I see happening there is that you've got British-born kids doing these acts of terrorism, and suddenly the state wakes up and thinks, "Oh God, what's going on? These are British-born kids." And the conclusion they seem to quickly rush to is, we didn't teach them to be British.
Yeah.
But actually, in many ways, they're more British than their parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it seems to have sort of, gone from, as opposed to thinking, well, we didn't teach them about the rights and wrongs of violence and political protest, it seems to have gone to, we didn't teach them to be British, which is a weird thing.
You know, we can have this kind of debate fairly openly here.
Yeah.
You can't have it generally out there. You can, but it's not very easy. It's even in those
Exactly.
professions where you'd think you could have this.
You can't, because there's actually so many
sensitivities about the language used and the offence that might be caused and so on.
I mean, I read somewhere that there's actually a relatively small proportion of the white population who are interacting with black and Asian people in this country. That I think that something like 2/3 of people would have no social interaction whatsoever outside of a formal one, say the working
But it's a two-way
And
thing.
I suddenly
I think
thought
that's
that means there's a very small proportion of white people meeting a lot of black and brown people, which feels very unfair on them.
No, but it's a two-way thing. We're as guilty of it as well, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, but that's
If you think about how many friends we've got that are non-Asian,
yeah.
we socialise with,
We're looking at something that
David's around here every other day.
of the way that if we all lived in the cities and that was it, then we'd all have to mix and interact.